3 of completing the squared notes is going to cover our steps for solving on the back of our note guide and the first 2 examples. Okay? So let's start with our steps. So in order to solve quadratics by completing the square, we write the equation in the form where the x squared term and the x term are on the same side of the equal sign, and that the constant is on the other. Okay. So for example, if we had x squared plus 3x plus 6 is equal to 0, we would want to move 6 to the other side so that we had x squared plus 3x is equal to negative 6. Okay. We want to make sure that the leading coefficient is 1. If it is not, we divide everything by the leading coefficient before continuing. Okay. Then we find our new c value. So going back to the front, remember that c was equal to b divided by 2 quantity squared. Okay, so we're going to add that to both sides. So now in our example up here, we have x squared plus 3 divided by, or plus 3x squared, or plus 3x plus 3 divided by 2 squared is equal to negative 6 plus 3 divided by 2 quantity squared. Okay. We then factor the left side, and it should be factored as something in the form of x plus b divided by 2 squared. And then finally, we solve by square roots. Okay. So once you have that written down, go ahead and move on to the first example. So let's work through that one together. Okay. So number 1, x squared plus 18x is equal to 0. Okay. Step number 1 is to write the equation in the form where the x squared and x terms are on one side of the equal sign and the constant is on the other. Okay, so x squared and x are on one side, constant on the other, so we're good there. Okay, our leading coefficient is 1, so we're good for step number 2. So now we find b divided by 2 squared. Okay, so b is 18. 18 divided by 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 9 squared is 81. Okay, so we're going to add 81 to both sides. X squared plus 18x plus 81 is equal to 0 plus 81 is 81. Okay. Our left side factors to be x plus b divided by 2, which is 9, quantity squared, is equal to 81. Okay. So now at this point, we take the square root of both sides. Square root of x plus 9 quantity squared cancels out the squared, left with x plus 9. Square root of 81 is plus or minus 9. Just like with solving by square roots, we set it equal to the positive and equal to the negative. Solve each one for x. Here we subtract 9. We get x is equal to 0. Here we subtract 9. We get x is equal to negative 18. So our two solutions for this quadratic are x equals 0 and x equals negative 18. Okay. Now what I want you to do is to pause the video and try examples 2 and 3 on your own. All right. After trying examples 2 and 3, let's go through these. Okay. So in number 2, step number 1 is already completed. X squared and x are on one side of the equal term sign and the constant is on the other. So we go ahead and find what we're going to be adding by b divided by 2 squared. Okay, so we have negative 44 over 2. And negative 44 divided by 2 is negative 22. Negative 22 squared is 484. Okay. So we plug that in. Okay, so we originally have x squared minus 4x, okay, is equal to 0. We add 484 to both sides. Okay. We then factor this into the form of x. Now again, this sign determines if we're adding or subtracting. So we have that is a minus, we're going to subtract. And then b divided by 2 is 22. Quantity squared is equal to 0 plus 484 is 484. Okay. We then take the square root of each side. Square root and squared cancel each other out, so we're left with x minus 22. The square root of 484 is positive negative 22. Set up two equations. X minus 22 is equal to 22, and x minus 22 is equal to negative 22. Solve each one. We add 22. X is equal to 44. So add 22, and x is equal to 0. So our two solutions are x is equal to 44, and x is equal to 0. And our last one for part 3. So now in this one, step number 1 is not completed. So we need to get our constant here to the other side. So since we're subtracting 2, we are going to add 2. So x squared minus 2x is equal to 2. Okay. Now we need to find our b divided by 2 quantity squared. So we have negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So we'll add 1 to both sides. Plus 1 is equal to 3. So we add 1 and add 1. We can then factor this. This factors to be x minus 1 quantity squared is equal to 3. Take the square root of each side. We get x minus 1 is equal to positive or negative square root of 3. Set up our two equations. So x minus 1 is equal to the positive root 3, and x minus 1 is equal to negative root 3. At this point, you can either leave it as a square root or change it to a decimal. Either way, when we solve for x, we're going to add 1. So we get x is equal to root 3 plus 1, which is approximately 2.73. Here again, we add 1 to negative root 3. We get x is equal to negative root 3 plus 1, and that is approximately negative 0.73. Okay. So that's some examples. What I want you to do is I want you to work on examples 4 and 5, and then check your answers in Note Guide Part 4.